Hello, hello! Today we're going to be talking Lore of Hashut. We're going to be taking a look at all different spells, talk about what they do, and when I would consider using them in a competitive setting. First up, we got Burning Wrath. So, this is a magic missile spell. It fires up on a pretty high arc, then comes down, explodes, and leaves a vortex in place, which wanders around a little bit. So if you're like me, and you tried this for the first time in campaign, probably use the undercast a lot, tried against some infantry blobs, maybe some single entity characters, and the damage was really underwhelming. The explosive didn't do a whole lot to the infantry blobs. The direct damage did okay against single characters, but not a whole lot. But when I went back and did some testing with the overcast, I found it to be actually really impressive. The overcast not only gives you 3 projectiles instead of 1, it also vastly increases the explosive damage, which makes it really effective at clearing out lightly armored infantry blobs like you can see here. On top of that, it also has some use against monstrous infantry. When you overcast it, it actually does very, very good damage against monstrous infantry, which is pretty unique. There aren't a lot of damage spells that actually clear monstrous infantry effectively, so it's pretty useful for that. Next up, we have Dark Subjugation. This is a debuff spell, -8 leadership, -24 melee defense for 17 seconds, for only 6 WOM. It's a decent debuff, but this low duration means that it doesn't really help you with your grindy frontline. The only way you're going to get much mileage out of this is if you combine it with a Bull Centaur charge, either in the rear against infantry or in the face against large single entities. But in these slow, grindy melee fights on the front line, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference since you have such low melee offensive stats. Ash Storm. Another debuff spell, this time -25% speed, as well as applying weakness to fire of 20% for 10 WOM in a pretty large radius. And in a perfect situation, like we have here, it actually does increase damage quite a bit, but seeing as you have so many other sources of weak to fire on this roster, you don't really need the weak to fire from here, and the slow is fairly underwhelming for 10 WOM, so this spell is usually better left at home. On to our next spell, we have Curse of Hashut. It's another direct damage spell, kind of like Spirit Leech. It has a lot more range for a little more extra price, but actually does quite a bit less damage than Spirit Leech. For 11 WOM, the damage is incredibly underwhelming, and on a roster where you already have access to Spirit Leech, there's very, very little compelling reason to actually take this over Spirit Leech. It just doesn't hit very hard. On to the big heavy hitters, now we have Hellhammer. A wind spell, does excellent damage against lightly armored infantry, and does alright against armored infantry too. As you can see here, it clears Bleak Swords almost instantly. For 16 WOM, it's a point-and-click delete to 1 infantry unit, although it does have a slow cast. And then if you overcast it, it increases the duration, which means it has a even longer hitbox, which means you can hopefully catch multiple enemy infantry in at the same time. But if you're going to pay that much for a spell, you better make sure you hit it, which is definitely a slow cast, and you don't have that very WOM recharge, so if you're going to go for the big one, make sure you hit your spells. Last but not least, we have Flames of Asgore, your big ol' AoE clear everything, kill everything spell. Pretty expensive at 18 WOM for an undercast, but it does the job, trust me. Against that light armored infantry, it hits even hard enough to kill a lot of heavy armored infantry. Gotta be careful with this one, as it will take out your own stuff. As for the overcast, I find I don't use it that much, because it's kind of just overkill. The undercast is usually enough to get the job done, while as the big one, it'll do the job, but it often takes your own stuff with you, so I typically stick with the undercast for this guy. And the lore passive. Killing Fire does a small amount of damage and aura around the caster when they cast. The damage is pretty underwhelming, so it's a little bit of nice extra damage, but I wouldn't rely on it to do a lot of heavy lifting for you. But it's a nice afterthought. Anyway, that's all the spells for the Lore of Hashut. Hope you guys found this helpful. Hope it's something you can take away and apply to your own games. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see you folks next time.